Hey everyone, Jamie here from TechnicalCafe.com, and in this tutorial we're going to be talking about the this keyword in Java and how we can go about using it to differentiate between different types of variables like instance variables and local variables within our programs. So what we have here are two classes. We have GameEntity.java, where we're going to be writing the majority of our code, and then over here we have game.java, which contains the main method and which is where we're going to be doing some demonstration and testing of the code we wrote in GameEntity. So for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to be creating a fictitious game character, a game entity, if you will. And like many video game characters, we're going to want to assign it some properties. So we're going to create some instance variables to reflect that. So we'll say private int health, because many characters in the game are going to have some hit points or some health. And we're going to say private int damage dealt, because many characters attack other characters in video games and deal some number of damage to them. So now that we have those, what we're going to want to do is create a constructor method so that we can set these upon instantiation of a game entity object. So we'll say public game entity, and then we're going to create a constructor here. And within this constructor, what we're going to want to do is take some parameters. So in order to differentiate between health and damage dealt, we're going to say int, and let's say hit points, and then we'll say int, and we'll say maybe attack damage. And now what we want to do is set these instance variables up here using whatever values come in through the constructor method. So we're going to say health equals hit points. Whatever is passed in through this hit points variable is going to be set equal to our instance variable health. And we're going to do the same thing for damage dealt. So damage dealt equals attack damage. And then we're going to want to create really quickly a public int, and we'll say get health. And we're just going to say return health. And we're going to want to do the same thing for damage dealt. So public int get let's say get damage dealt. And we're just going to want to return damage dealt. All right, so let's go over here to our game.java class and actually instantiate an object of game entity and see what we can do with it. So we'll say game entity, we'll say my entity equals new game entity. And because we have to instantiate this object with some parameters, we're going to set hit points equal to 10 and attack damage equal to 2. So we'll say 10 and 2 respectively. And let's go ahead and compile and run this to make sure everything works as expected. And it does. So now let's say we want to print out to the screen the value of these two instance variables here for our my entity object. We can do that by saying system.out.println my entity.get health. And then for the damage dealt, we'll do the same thing. So system.out.println my entity.get damage dealt. And if we were to compile and run this here, you'll notice that we have 10 and 2, which is what we expected. And this is because we passed in 10 to the constructor, and that got passed in through this hit points local variable, and then this local constructor variable got set to our instance variable health, and the same thing happened for attack damage, our value of 2. However, there's an easier way to do this so that we can use less names and keep our programs a little bit more lean, and that's by using the this keyword. So instead of using hit points, we can actually set this local constructor variable to health, which happens to be the same thing as our instance variable. And we can go ahead and do the same thing for damage dealt. So we can say damage dealt. And you'll notice that when we do this, we actually get a compiler error here that says hit points cannot be resolved to a variable. And attack damage cannot be resolved to a variable. And that's just because we got rid of whatever was in here. Let's go ahead and set this equal to what the new stuff is. So health. And let's go ahead and say damage dealt. And notice that we're still getting a compiler error, or more like a warning, that says the assignment to variable health has no effect. So the reason for this is because what we're doing is not using the instance variable up here. We're using whatever's local. So in order to say that we want to use this instance variable up here, what we have to do is denote this by saying this. And what this keyword does is just basically says that you want to use the variable within the class, or the instance variable. So now this .health is associated with this instance variable health up at the top of the class here, and this .damageDealt is associated with the instance variable damageDealt up at the top of our class. And just regular health without the this is associated with the local constructor variable, or the parameter, and the same thing for damageDealt. So if we were to come back over here to our game.java and compile and run this, you'll notice that we still get 10 and 2, and that's because we appropriately, used our variables. So feel free to play around with that. It's a bit of a confusing topic at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to use, and it can come in handy just so you can avoid writing, different variable names. And when you have, 4, 5, 6 or more classes, or however many classes you're using, it just helps to keep down on the number of variables that you have to remember and use. So feel free to post any questions in the comments below, and thank you for watching.